You're listening to Community Radio, CKMS, Radio Waterloo, 102.7, 946 on the Rogers Digital Network. You can find us.
Good morning, Waterloo Region. Happy Monday, August the 19th, 2019. This is CKMS Community Connections. My name is Bob Jonkman. To have a show full of music for you today, we're going to start off with the Beach Bats from Hamilton. This is Country Drums.
Left unexplained, giving away to strangers again. Lovers locked at the hips, losing their grips, learning how to behave. Years waving goodbye, life's floating by. Need to catch up. Fears sharpen their claws, locked in their jaws, pile them into the truck. just a lost and found love. Slow down. What's the hurry with your big ideas? What's the matter, baby? How long have you felt left out? All it takes is just a change of perspective. What's the matter, baby? How long have you lived in doubt? Come closer, save some space for the faithless. Something profound, but it's deep underground, not up in your head. Sometimes you play dumb, sometimes you play rough, sometimes you play dead. But it appears that a fear of living, but you're dying from these days. What's the matter, baby? How long have you felt left out? All it takes is just a change of perspective. Hey, what's the matter, baby? How long have you been in town? Come closer, save some space for the faithless. Oh, no.
Stick to your guns, sweetheart, and stick with me. I'll show you all the things you wish to say. It ain't an ugly world, but it sure ain't beautiful. I'd love to have you for the night, sure ain't you beautiful? It's just wants everything, oh baby. Not everything comes for free. You're the queen of the gypsies. Want you back, darling Hollywood, baby. You're the queen of the gypsies. And I'd love to see you and me get crazy. I'm a fast walking, smooth talking kind of gentleman. And you're a boxer with brunette hair and big plans. Doesn't LA look pretty tonight from that penthouse view? Babe, why don't you show me the penthouse bedroom? And she just wants everything. Oh, darling, now everything comes for free. You're the queen of the gypsies. Want your back, darling Hollywood, baby. You're the queen of the gypsies. And I'd love to see you and me get crazy. And I'd love to have you in my bed. I know you want it. You're the queen of the gypsies. Want your back, darling Hollywood, baby. You're the queen of the gypsies. And I'd love to see you and me get crazy. You're the queen of the gypsies. Want your back, darling Hollywood, baby. You're the queen of the gypsies. And I'd love to see you and me get crazy. Oh.
That's James Marin and the Midnight Runners with Queen of the Gypsies. James Marin and the Midnight Riders, sorry, not Runners, is Owen Bulger on bass, keys and vocals, Chris King on drums and vocals, Julian Antonini on guitar, keyboards and vocals, and James Marin lead vocals and guitar. James wrote to us, he wrote, "This is James Marin from the band James Marin and the Midnight Riders. We are a rock and roll band from the GTA. We've played in many places, including Toronto Global Youth Day, North by Northeast Toronto, many festivals, clubs, and private functions. Our band has recently released our debut EP, The Midnight Special, to a full house at the Hideout. Our influences include Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, and Aerosmith. We were wondering how we would go about getting our music played on your radio station. Well, James, this is how. You write to us to office@radiowaterloo.ca and provide us a link, or actually attach the MP3 file with all the metadata attached, and provide a little bit of bio information. It's always nice to read something about you and the band and how you got started and where you're performing, and just generally what you're all about. James Marin's website is jamesmarinmusic.com, and you can read all about them, although there's little in the way of bio information there. Before James, we heard the Beach Bats, and the Beach Bats are a group from Hamilton. Their website is thebeachbats.bandcamp.com, and all it says in the way of bio information there is sandy garage rock from an inner city beach. Happened to from Hamilton. I could have sworn I had correspondence from the Beach Bats, but it turns out that it's not in my inbox. So if it's not in my inbox, it must not have happened. Hope to hear a bit more from Beach Bats a little bit later on in the program. Let's have a quick look at the KWP's events calendar. There's not much on the calendar this week. The Grable Gallery exhibit is still exhibiting New Fracture. It's been ongoing since the 6th of May and goes on till October the 25th. The Grable Art Gallery exhibit website reads, Meg Harder is an interdisciplinary artist working and living in the Grand River watershed. Harder graduated with a BA in Fine Arts from the University of Waterloo, which included a 6-month exchange at the Bezalel Academy of Art in Jerusalem. She studied under Paula Wilson at the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in 2018, and she was a 2015 Eastern Comma Artist in Residence at Rare Charitable Research Reserve and at Vermont Studio Center in 2018. She's exhibited in Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, Contemporary Art Forum of Kitchener and Area, the museum, and she's a recent recipient of the Ontario Arts Council Emerging Artist Project Grant. Harder's present research focus on artistic practices that expand and disrupt canonized art forms and narrative genres to express emerging realities and revisionist histories. She draws on fracture folk art, an imaginative and densely detailed illuminated calligraphy historically produced by early Mennonite settlers to Ontario. Fracture was traditionally made to venerate important religious and cultural texts and was displayed in everyday contexts like the walls of homes and the covers of Bibles and hymnals. In recognition of her ancestral traditions, her ink and gouache drawings carry forward the aesthetic sensibilities of fracture and biblical myth while reframing their content with a queer, feminine, and bioregional optic. By reinterpreting these archived images in a personal lexicon of motifs and symbols to create fictive environments, she aims to disarm exploitative narratives and create space for new histories and futures. The Grable Art Gallery is open during the summer on Monday to Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., closed on Saturdays and Sundays, and starting in the fall, will be open from Monday to Thursday at 8:30 to 10 p.m., and Fridays from 8 till 6, and also Saturday from 1 to 5. The Grable Art Gallery exhibit is at Grable University College on Westmount, just a little bit north of University. So it looks like the calendar has nothing on for today, but on tomorrow we have from the REAP Environmental Network, we have an introductory lecture on fruit trees for beginners. It's ideal for beginners interested in where to get started with growing your own fruit trees and shrubs in your yard. Fruit trees not only provide us with food, but with all of their flowers, they also benefit our pollinator friends. Topics covered include choosing your tree and where to plant it, pruning to encourage fruit, and ways to prevent and address common problems such as pests and diseases. This demonstration is for those wanting to grow fruit trees and don't know where to start in an endless sea of information. You can go to the kwpeace.ca website, go to the Tuesday, August the 20th date, and click on the link there so you can register with REAP. And then also on Tuesday is the weekly meeting for WR Nonviolence. They'll be meeting at Queen Street Commons Cafe, 43 Queen Street South in Kitchener, Ontario, 7 p.m. They're going to be discussing themes and organizing activities for nonviolence. Coming up will be IDAPAN, the International Days of Peace and Nonviolence, and that'll probably be the focus of the meetings for the next couple of weeks. So, build a better world together. Join WR Nonviolence at the Queen Street Commons, 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. On Wednesday, there's a monthly meeting for the Council of Canadians, the Kitchener-Waterloo chapter. The Kitchener-Waterloo chapter of Council of Canadians meets on the third Wednesday of every month from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the community room at the Bread and Roses Cooperative Homes, 307 Queen Street South at the corner of Queen and Cortlandt in Kitchener. There is parking available, but have to check with the organizers to get a permit to park on the correct lot. Current topics that they're discussing include electoral reform, the Nestle boycott, the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, and other trade deals. Everybody's welcome. For information, please contact kw.cofc@gmail.com, or you can follow KWCOFC on Twitter. And that's it for the moment for the calendar. We'll come back to that. We've got some more music, more Beach Bats. Let's listen to more music from their current album. This is Cursed.
skeletons in your closet. Didn't get there on accident. You just chalk them up to bad habits and now you say you're cursed, holding on to the things that hurt. There's something now deep inside this time. Feels alright. Now you say you're through, 'cause you can't buy back your youth. And how do you quench that thirst with a curse? Arise, the sunrise by the ocean. Emotion, the rivers running dry. The humid breeze brings noise inside. To a girl too burnt out to cry. Uncomplicated, delicate, I'll swim layers of your hair. Display the blurs of reality, sadnesses of yours I will share. But how much does it even matter? The sun burning down the hour. I'm turning up the street. She pretends to fall asleep. I am someone that she's met inside of a dream. Ugly, so I wandered down into the waiting dark. I find myself back where it began. Find myself back before the start. Whose house could this be? Whose body is this wrapping around me? These ancient memories, these empty buildings full of people staying put. She's waiting there with that old familiar look. But how does it even matter? The sun burning down the hour. pretends to be a slave. I am someone that she's met inside of a dream.
It's a lonesome away from your kindred and all, by the campfire at night where the wild dingoes call. But there's nothing so lonesome, morbid or drear, than to stand in the bar of a pub with no beer. Now the publican's anxious for the quota to come. There's a faraway look on the face of the bum. The maid's gone all cranky, the cook's acting weird. What a terrible place is a pub with no beer. Then the stockman rides up with his dry, dusty throat. He comes up to the bar, pulls a wad from his coat. But the smile on his face quickly turns to a sneer as the barman says sadly, the pub's got no beer. Then in comes the swagman, all covered with flies. He throws down his roll, wipes the sweat from his eyes. But when he is told, he says, "What's this I hear? I've trudged 50 flamin' miles to a pub with no beer." There's a dog on the veranda, for his master he waits, but the boss is inside, drinking wine with his mates. He hurries for cover, and he cringes in fear. It's no place for a dog round a pub with no beer. Old Billy the blacksmith rides home on his horse. The cops pull him over, but he's sober, of course. He blows in the bag, and they all shed a tear. There's no place for a booze bus round a pub with no beer. Oh, it's hard to believe that there's customers still, but the money's still tinkling in that old ancient till. The wine buffs are happy, and I know they're sincere when they say they don't care if the pub's got no beer. Old Billy the blacksmith, the first time in his life, has gone home cold sober to his darling wife. He walks in the kitchen, she says, "You're early, Bill dear." Then he breaks down and he tells her, the pub's got no beer. So it's a lonesome away from your kindred and all, by the campfire at night where the wild dingoes call. But there's nothing so lonesome, morbid or drear than to stand in the bar of a pub with no beer.
No beer.
No beer.
The saddest song in the world, A Pub with No Beer by Doug Smith. Doug Smith from Ottawa, who sent us a CD that we are very happy to play on the radio. If you've got a band and you've got a CD out, by all means, send us the CD. You can send it to CKMS Radio Waterloo. We are in Suite 114B at 283 Duke Street West in Kitchener, Ontario. You can find information at the Contact Us page on our website, radiowaterloo.ca. Before that, we heard a little bit more from the Beach Bats. That was Cursed and Mystery Man. Let's finish off the week with the KW Peace calendar. KW Peace is a calendar listing all the social justice events, environmental activities, and things to do in Waterloo region. We've just done Wednesday, so on, I guess that finishes off most of that week, but on Sunday next week, we've got Food for Thought from KW Hungry Minds. It's happening Sunday, August the 25th, starting at 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's a monthly discussion on how we see the world, what's important, and how these values are reflected in society. Food for Thought is taking place at Stevens Place. You can find the address on the KW Peace website, or Food for Thought and KW Hungry Minds is also on meetup.com. That's happening on Sunday, August the 26th at 1 p.m. And after that, we're into Monday of next week. Like I said, it's a bit of a sparse calendar for KW Peace this week, but Monday next week, there's a PhD dissertation defense from inclusive governance to peace, exploring African governance systems. That starts at 11 a.m., so you'll have to miss half of CKMS Community Connections for that. It's Carolina Werner's PhD dissertation defense, and not much information about that on the KW Peace website, but you can find out more at the Balsillie School of International Affairs. That's probably taking place out of the CG building at the corner of Herb Street and Caroline in Waterloo. I have guests in the studio. We have the boys and I. They'll be appearing on the radio with a live concert very, very shortly. So we'll have them in a bit. Let's carry on with a little bit of Beach Bats. This is the last tune on their album called Mirage. And then we'll have some Pete Moss with some particular songs about weeds. This is Mirage, the Beach Bats from Hamilton.
We spend our lives misguided by the stars, searching for life that isn't ours. So I'm putting all my faith in the mirage. Yes, I'm putting all my faith in the mirage. So other people don't walk half as far, but they get there anyway. Putting all my faith in the mirage.
Before singing, I want to thank the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples for their long-standing and continued care towards this land. Toronto, where I live, comes from the Mohawk word tukaranto, which means where there are trees standing in water. This paints a picture of what my city looked like before all the big buildings, roads, and cars. I hope these songs can serve as a reminder of the many ways plants help us and the animals we live with. Without plants, there'd be no dogs, flying squirrels, or people. I also hope you'll consider giving back to plants in whatever way you can. Maybe start a garden or build a hotel for bees. Some people say plants even like music. Speaking of music, it looks like everyone behind me here is ready, and it's time for Plants Rock to start. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the album. Get it? Because this is an album about plants and plants bloom, so it's funny to say album rather than...
Peter, I think it's time to get started.
Yeah, sounds good.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me what's your name. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me of your ways. Tell me of your ways. There's a wildflower named sumac. It's one that deers attack. Knock it down to get its fruits. Walk away with sour toots, and then we sing. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me what's your name. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me of your ways. Tell me of your ways. There's a wildflower named Wild Rose. Food for birds, bears, and coyotes. Best not eat the red berries, for they make your bum itchy. And then we sing. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me what's your name. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me of your ways. Tell me of your ways. Let's hear some mandolin. Well, there's a wildflower named garlic mustard. It's one that gets people flustered. Spread so fast no trees can grow. At least it makes a yummy pesto. And then we sing. We sing. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me what's your name. Wild, 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 wildflower, tell me of your ways. 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 You know I'm not a fighter. I don't like wet willies, but there's a plant that's good for all you silly billies. I'm not talking about daisies.
He's not talking about daisies.
I'm not singing about twigs.
He's not singing about twigs.
Before to get to the root,
For to get to the root,
you have got to dig for burdock. Talking about burdock. burdock I saw. You stick to a fox, then it scratched you off, and you fell to the ground, came unlocked. Guess what I found? Where you dropped, tiny and round, all your seeds had been set free. The scientist was walking his dog Rose. Rose got covered in birds, so he looked up close. Little hooks on the bird,
Little hooks on the bird.
they even stuck to clothes.
They even stuck to clothes.
He took some samples home
Took some samples home.
and invented Velcro from burdock. Talking about burdock. Burdock the wise never says goodbye. It hitches a ride on her cotton clothes. Went outside, smelling a rose, feeling alive, as if it chose where to be, accidentally free. 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 Accidentally free.
I was dancing with my darling to the Tennessee waltz when an old friend I happened to see. I introduced him to my darling, and while they were dancing, my friend stole my sweetheart from me. I remember the night in the Tennessee waltz, 'cause I know just how much I lost. Yes, I lost my little darling the night they were playing that beautiful Tennessee waltz. My heart was breaking to the music of the Tennessee waltz. How could I keep watching her dance? Could she see me while I waited to the melody playing? My heart's empty without her romance. Well, it must be the fault of the Tennessee waltz. Wish I'd known just how much it would cost, but I didn't see it coming. It's all over but the crying. Blame it all on the Tennessee waltz. Now I wonder how a dance like the Tennessee waltz could have broken my heart so complete. Well, I couldn't blame my darling, and who could help falling in love with my darling so sweet? I remember the night and the Tennessee waltz, 'cause I know just how much I lost. Yes, I lost my little darling the night they were playing that beautiful Tennessee waltz.
Doug Smith with the Tennessee Waltz, a good country time classic. Before that, we heard Pete Moss with his new album, which I think might be called Cattail, dealing with all manner of weeds and indigenous vegetation, an album for kids. Pete wrote to us. They said, "Hey, Waterloo, Kids Tunes." Kids Tunes is a show that we air on Sunday nights. I have a digital submission here for my upcoming children's release, Plant Rock by Pete Moss. Toronto's Pete Moss performs nature songs for all ages. His debut album, Plants Rock, is a tribute to the magic of plants in your neighborhood. With a playful folk pop style and creative storytelling, these songs inspire care and curiosity towards the natural world. You can hear the single Cattail, which we have in our digital library. And he's been on various shows on CBC As It Happens, and provided us with all the music on his album. A little bit flustered because we've got a band practicing out in the hallway. That's The Boys and I have arrived at the studio, warming up a little bit. We're going to have an in-studio concert for the second half of the show, so it'll be very exciting indeed. Going to leave you probably to the top of the hour with various tunes and new music, all Canadian content, of course. We'll be listening to Union Duke with 1, 2, 3. After that, we've got Troy Kokol, Lonely Ghost from his Live in the Studio album. The Cravens with Settle Down. And to top off the hour, we'll have the Amsterdam Cypher Instrumental by Chris 1-2 and the Artifacts, which was produced out of Copenhagen and may not actually be Canadian content. James Dunn and the Boys and I will be appearing at 11 o'clock. Stay tuned and listen to some other Canadian content music in the meantime. This is CKMS Community Connections. My name is Bob Jonkman. You're listening to CKMS FM 102.7 Radio Waterloo.
I'm broken and bleeding and writhing and reeling and huffing and heaving, so busted no feeling could ever describe this feeling inside. I'm fighting and trying and failing, denying I'm lonely and dying, so slowly I'm lying awake every night with you on my mind. The sunset is mocking me 'cause I can't forget you watching it with me, and I get a terrible longing for days gone by when you were mine. The radio is haunting me everywhere I go, reminds me of when we were dead slow. Seems like a memory follows me down every road, like a lonely ghost. stumbling and slipping and tumbling and tripping and sulking and fretting and bumbling and getting just barely through life with this chill in my spine. I'm pining and searching and faking and flirting and cussing and cursing, 'cause nothing is working, there's no way to find someone like you down the line. The sunset is mocking me 'cause I can't forget you watching it with me, and I get a terrible longing for days gone by when you were mine. The radio is haunting me everywhere I go, reminds me of when you were dead slow. Seems like a memory follows me down every road, like a lonely ghost. Kinda feels like I might be going a little insane, 'cause apparitions of you appear every now and again. Sometimes I see you, sometimes I hear you call out my name. Seems without you I'll never be the same. The sunset is mocking me 'cause I can't forget you watching it with me, and I get a terrible longing for days gone by when you were mine. The radio is haunting me everywhere I go, reminds me of when we were dead slow. Seems like your memory follows me down every road, like a lonely ghost, like a lonely ghost.
Got this fire burning in my head. A darker ghost roams through my veins. A line's been drawn on a battlefield. Salt's been thrown to hide the stains. Ooh, let me go now. Let me go and settle down. Whoa, let me go now. Let me go and settle down. Settle down. It's the kind of feeling that moves my soul. Can't let it bring me to my knees. What's set in motion must run its course. Silver apple on the tree. Oh, let me go now. Let me go and settle down. Oh, let me go now. Let me go and settle down. Settle
You're listening to CKMS, Community Connections, on Radio Waterloo, CKMS FM 102.7. In the studio is the boys and I, who are going to take us out to the top of the hour. Hit it, guys.
Now I only want and I want you back. If my mind looks so fine, my old glowing like a shining light, you were helping me inside. You held the reins while I told you lies. Oh, 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 I want to love you and make it alright. Till the morning light, but I know you have seen nothing. Now I only want and not want you back. Memories, pictures in my head, but we never leave each other's arms in bed. Near the end, sleeping on the couch, you wouldn't let me in 'cause I was halfway out. Oh, I wanna love you and make it alright. Wanna hold you till the morning light, but I know you have seen our best. Now I only want and not want you back. I wanna love you and make it alright. Wanna hold you till the morning light, but I know you have seen our best. Now I only want, I wanna love you and make it alright. Wanna hold you, that dress of white, but I know you have seen our best. Now I only want and not want you back. Now I only want and not want you back.
Woo. Great to have you in the studio, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Introduce yourselves. Who have we got here?
Oh, we've got Mark Riley here on lead guitar, Luke Descharme on drums, and Adam Postma on bass, and myself, James Blacktop, on lead vocals and rhythm guitar.
And what brought you together? What? Not why you're here, but what are you doing together? How did you?
Initially, Kijiji, yeah. There was Adam and Luke were looking for a new lead singer for their band, and I responded to an ad on Kijiji, and that's how the three of us kind of linked up. And we had our other lead guitarist leave the band a while back, and had a friend here that I had done some work with last year, and recommended him for the band, and the rest is history.
Is that the normal way to do things? Is that you post it out on Kijiji? Hello, I'd like to form a band.
I don't know if it's the normal way, but it worked for us.
Well, I mean,
is there a normal way?
You see a lot of postings, right? So you'll go to music stores and you'll see, oh, Sherwood or whatever, they'll have people put their, postings up. Call me at this number. I think in the more modernly, I think it's probably Kijiji. There's a certain amount of like, okay, who's the other person on the other side of this ad? Are they going to, do anything? But that was actually the advantage of the garage. because the garage was a central meeting location where we rehearsed, which wasn't anyone's house. Like you weren't going somewhere, so that was actually a nice part about it. Is that absolutely
you're not beholden to anybody in the band.
Yeah, we're not beholden to anyone in the band. We're not going to someone's random house and for the first time being like, where in the world are we going and stuff like that.
Yeah. It was nice to be able to play with James in a different setting, and it was James that approached me saying, "Hey, you know what? We could really use your abilities in our band." And I came by and tried out, and luckily enough, they said, "Hey, guess what? You're the guy." So here we are.
But it can't always work out that nicely. I mean, there's thousands of people responding to your ad in all likelihood. How do you know that you're going to be compatible? How do you know that you're going to sound this good?
Trial and error.
Yeah, we don't. We don't. Like any experience that I've had looking for bandmates and stuff on Kijiji is, showing up where, I'll get 100 people that'll respond to it. Maybe 6 people actually show up, and out of that, maybe 1 person that was, usable, right?
So not thousands then.
Yeah, not thousands, not thousands.
But yeah, we had that before. James, we had the previous band. We had a guy who was singing. He didn't really love singing. He was kind of doing it because he wanted to play music. And we had tried out a couple other singers, and it didn't work. And then, eventually we went and found James. And I was like, okay, well, this is definitely going to work. So
Oh, thank you.
You sound good. You're tight. It worked out really well from Kijiji. That's amazing. So James, I met you at the Nonviolence Festival, the Nonviolence Day in the Park, where you and Mark were playing. And how'd you get there?
I had played at that festival as a solo act, probably in the first year or two that Nonviolence was running a festival. It was back in like 2008, 2009, and again Kijiji. Right. It was,
really?
I was looking at events and stuff online, and I saw one that said like, hey, we're still looking for musicians for this. It's kind of an acoustic thing. And so I approached Mark and said, hey, we're not going to be able to do a full band thing here because there's not going to be any electricity. Do you want to do like an acoustic duo thing like that? And we were all for it.
Yeah. So it was a pro bono gig. It's not something that you're getting paid for.
But for a good cause.
Yeah, for a good cause. Yeah, nonviolence is a good cause. Yeah. And you did that acoustically.
Yeah.
And even though you're in the studio, which is full of electricity, you're still acoustic here today.
Well, yeah, I didn't know what we were walking into. Right? I knew there'd be electricity, but I didn't know if there'd be, room for a full drum kit or, our Fenders or anything like that. Right. So we just decided to go acoustic.
Well, hopefully that's always the thing. You hope that your music translates acoustically. That is probably the mark of hoping better musicians is when your music does translate acoustically instead of just being only electric. Now, granted, saying that, there's some stuff, prog metal and stuff like that, that's not going to translate necessarily the same acoustically, but for sure, I think we're probably more in that space where it will translate nicely between the two. So
regardless if it's plugged or unplugged.
So it's all guitar, no synth, no. Okay.
No synth. Yeah, no. We tried that one day. I think we had a keyboard, but it was like, this isn't panning out for us. It's not our thing. So
it's working out quite well.
That's great.
Yeah.
The music you were playing, own composition?
Yeah, that was something that was a song that I wrote a few years ago after a bad breakup. Right, it was one of those things where it was. I could romanticize how good that relationship was, but really towards the end, it wasn't magical at all, right? We were both at odds with each other, but after you break up, you think, actually maybe things weren't so bad, right? And then it was just that weird place where it's like I want to just be able to not want you back anymore, right? And that was a song that I brought to the band, and they jumped on board with it right away, and it's become one of our most tight songs anyways that we do.
It is. It's got an earworm quality to it. I'm going to be humming that all the way home. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, well, and it won't fall out. All the stuff you do original stuff, or do you cover other bands?
Oh yeah, we do a lot of covers. I don't know, Luke, what do we do?
We have That's All by Genesis. We do some Foo Fighters every now and then.
Hotel California.
Well, because it's a wide range, right? So when you're playing, different venues call for different things, right? So the average bar is not going to want you to play necessarily all your own stuff because, let's be honest, when the bar is bringing you in to play, they typically want you to keep people at the bar, and the average person at the bar doesn't want to hear only stuff they've never heard. So there's a certain requirement to play other artists, not to mention learn from other artists, right? Because that's how everyone learns, right? Everyone has been learned from someone else, and so you
Plagiarism is the best teacher.
Yeah, and you pick up all that stuff from those other artists that you play. So there's that side of it too.
Okay. So if you're covering, what would you cover for me today?
Oh, if we would just throw one out of the thing, what if we rehearsed?
It have to be one from the next show on the 31st.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Cash's Hurt or
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash's version of the Nine Inch Nails tune.
Yeah.
If you can do that, let's cue yourselves up and off you go.
All right. I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole. The old familiar sting. Try to give it all away, but I remember everything. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away. And you could have it all. I am my girl. I will let you down. I will make I wear this crown of thorns upon my liar's chair, full of broken thoughts that I cannot compare. Beneath the stain of time, the feelings disappear. Well, you are someone else, and I'm still right here. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end. And you will have it all. I am my older. I will let you down. I will make you. Well, if I could start again, a million miles away, I would keep myself. I would find a way.
Well done.
Great stuff. Great stuff. You sound like Johnny Cash.
when I try to, normally that's the lowest my range will go.
Yeah.
More akin to like singing, higher stuff like Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith and like Billy Idol and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying there that the people in the bars don't necessarily want to hear new music.
Well, what I more meant by that is usually from an exclusivity perspective. Like, hey, yeah, that some people are more than happy to hear new music, but sometimes in bars, right? Sometimes people go to bars because it's comfort. And well, what's comfort for people in the bars? Sometimes stuff they know, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of that play, which I mean is the same with everyone in the world. There's plenty of people who love new music, always want to hear new music. Plenty of people who love old stuff and only want to hear the old stuff, right? And so I think there tends to be. I mean, most bars aren't necessarily looking for us to cover originals. So when you're talking to them, so James does most of our booking, but I'm presuming when you're talking to them, it's an expectation that there's covers in there. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the way we try to run our set lists, anyways, is usually kind of a mixture, right? We'll do a couple covers and then one or two originals, bounce back into a couple covers, keep the covers keep asses in the seats, right?
I suppose, yeah.
But the originals will hopefully get them to come back and hear you again.
Yeah. So the only reason I'm wondering is because the new music has to come from somewhere. Sorry, the established music has to come from somewhere. It was new music at one time. So where does that transition occur? Where something starts as new music, something that nobody's ever heard before, to becoming an old-time classic?
Sometimes it seems like with $100,000 played into someone's CD so that they can tour, stuff like that. So interestingly enough, some of the people I know in the industry, right, who are recording engineers, and I talk to, they talk about one of the guys who's a country artist. So he wanted to become a country artist. He was actually a chiropractor before. He wanted to become a country artist. It was costing him $100,000 to break into the scene because that's what he wanted. Like he was going to break into the scene, become a country artist.
Right.
All of us have jobs. Like all of us do something else, right? Where that would be a different thing if we were intending to, go fast with this. It'd be a whole different focus and be a whole different division of labor as far as that goes, right? So presumably it comes from that kind of stuff, right? I mean, you have the people like Justin Bieber, who's a classic one, goes on YouTube and gets found and stuff like that, and plenty of that still happens, and that's the fantastic thing of new media. Is new media, and your shows probably like yours, gives that opportunity for the new music to come up. But it's pretty hard, right, to just walk up to any old radio station and just say, "Hey, can you play all of this original music that you've never heard?"
Yeah.
So I'm sure they get plenty of that.
This is the radio station for that.
This is the radio station for that. Perfect.
Yeah.
We found the right place.
we got enough new material coming in. The CKMS Community Connections is a 2-hour show, and just the Canadian content portion of the music that comes in a week exceeds the amount of time that I've got available to play it. So there's absolutely no reason for radio stations to not play new music. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it's all pretty darn good. So, but you all have day jobs, you say.
Yeah.
So is the day job there to provide you revenue to do the music, or is the music just a bit of a thing on top of your regular lives?
I feel like we all have a little bit different focus as far as that goes, right? For myself, my day job is something to keep the bills paid while we play and try to build a name for ourselves and stuff like that. Because at this point, it adds up to fun money. It doesn't add up to paying rent, right?
Yeah, it's tough.
But
it's a spectrum because I think the goals even coming in aren't not as it was a problem, but like my goal coming in was like music's always been part of my life, and so I've always wanted to play music, and so I was looking for a band to play music with. But like, if you suddenly said, "Drop your stuff tomorrow," we're going overseas to go do this tour somewhere, I'd be like, versus I'm sure James would probably be like, "Okay, how am I going to make this work?" And that's fantastic. And that's a fantastic mentality, right? So it's just, I don't know where you guys fall. I can't speak for you guys, but
well, I've been doing my job for a while now, and it just like James was saying, it pays the bills, and I was really looking forward to playing with other great musicians and seeing where it goes. But if it doesn't, well, at least I got something to fall back on too. Yeah. If it does, well, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. I'm hopefully optimistic, but somewhat realistic at the same time.
My coworkers told me on the way here to remember them when I got famous. I'll do my best to remember.
They're not holding on to you very tight.
Any hope of hitting it big with a recording contract?
Definitely me. We had actually had some plans kind of fall through as to actually getting into a studio to record one song to kind of play on during this interview. It just didn't sync up time-wise between when we had made the decision and today's date. So in my thought pattern, like we've got a lot of shows coming up kind of booked up between now and the end of October. So hopefully thinking of getting in the studio sometime like November, December to record a song or two and see where it takes us.
And that's out of pocket for you. You're not being picked up by a label to do that for you. Yeah. So hopefully that makes it big. When you get stuff recorded, bring it over here and we'll stick it on the digital music library and we'll get into the rotation.
That's excellent.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Well, that's what we're here for. It's community radio and your community. So, community radio for the community, by the community, and today about the community too. Yeah. Recording contracts don't necessarily make it big either. I mean, my father-in-law was a musician too, wrote hundreds of songs, got maybe $12 a year out of royalties for that. So
yeah, it's funny, the EP that I released on like Spotify and all those streaming services and stuff, it's funny, I got a check a couple of weeks ago for, it was about 1,000 streams, right? And it equated to $1.76.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like it's a lot of money, right? They're paying it's about a quarter of a penny per stream, right?
Per stream.
So it's kind of takes away from that a bit.
And so when I do things like download the stream to play it in the digital music library, you get, my quarter penny out of that. And well, got something else to play up
I mean,
for
you're
us?
saying about the recording contracts, right? Not making it big. Well, it's because it's easy to forget too. Because as musicians, we can, and it's not a bad thing, because you need to be proficient in your instrument, right? But we can be very focused on being proficient in our instrument. But there's that whole the when you transfer from just playing your instrument to being in front of people, because that's where most people make their connection, right? They'll listen to music on the radio. There's a lot of really well produced stuff on the radio. Okay, great, But if they go to a show and you are just nothing on a show, right? They're gonna be like, okay, like unless they love you already at a show, they're gonna be like, okay, well this band is kind of dead in the water, right? So it's that transition into the live show where it's like, oh right, we actually need to like bring the theatrical element. Like we need to wear our emotions more on our faces than we otherwise would, and we need to be like our movements need to be exaggerated. And James knows about this; he's aware. But I pointed him because he's our lead singer. The rest of us can get away with a little bit more, like just being standing around looking stock still. I mean, that's always the joke about
sitting for that.
It's always a joke about the bassist, right?
Yeah.
The bassist just ends up hiding and dissolving in the background, and no one ever sees them. But that can be one of the dividing factors, right? If your live show isn't there, then that can be a lot of revenue sources for people as well.
But that's probably got to be your main revenue source, because that's where people will actually pay for. That's the scarce commodity. Streaming is not scarce. Anybody can stream.
Because it's duplicated, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there's only one of you guys, and so if I want to see you guys, I got to pay to the venue to be able to see and experience the live show.
For sure.
So.
And it kind of forces us to step out of that comfort zone, and like Adam was saying, just we were so used to just playing our instruments well. It doesn't matter what we're doing, where we're looking, or whatever. And all of a sudden, now we got to perform.
Yeah,
it's not just playing music; it's being an entertainer, really.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Not easy.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I've always had something like that. Like live has always been the place for me to go. Right, my fiance likes Kiss. And when we got together, I hated Kiss, like with a passion. But as a present to her over Christmas, I got us tickets to go see Kiss, and which just happened this past Saturday. And although I wasn't a huge fan of their music coming into it, they put on such a great live show with the pyro and everything going at the same time. And all of a sudden, I'm a Kiss fan, right? And it's like that's it. Again, you talk about community and going into a show and being in that same space with a band, is something magical about that versus, having something on shuffle on like iTunes, right? It's not quite the same idea.
Yeah, so
I'd like to use Van Halen as an instance and running. Like we were practicing the other day Van Halen tune. It was just like, as a bassist, I think I was one note for almost the entire song. So, but Van Halen it's that glam rock area, right? Where it's like, it was about the show. Like, they're still good musicians, don't get me wrong, and like the guitarists for sure. But like, it's just like, not everyone, has to be bringing the proficiency. And you'll even see that, right? You have a band like Red Hot Chili Peppers is really well known for their bassist. Their bassist sticks out a lot. Or you have a band that, you can have some bands that are just like all great musicians. Rush, I guess.
Yeah.
Like they're all just phenomenal musicians. But you'll also have different times, different instruments will stand out, right?
Different songs, different,
And then it's about the show that the rest of us put on. So.
So even if you're only playing one note through the
Oh, you
entire
can play
show,
that note very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that note can be played.
and you get paid the same as everybody else.
Very true.
Yeah, can we choose more of those songs?
I have no problem with that.
Got something else?
Yeah, I'll set this one up. This one's one that's really personal to me. Again, another one I brought to the band. It's called "That Ain't Me Anymore," and I wrote this actually after getting sober a couple of years ago. I was sitting in a treatment center in called Westover out in Thamesville, and sitting in the gazebo one day, and I'm about 4 months sober, and these lyrics came into my head, and although they were about myself and my recovery from alcohol and drug addiction, somebody had mentioned to me, it's like really like the lyrics are just vague enough that it's really about anybody who's overcome their own demons, right? And so that's what we're gonna play for.
Yeah.
I've been to hell and back to hell again. Wounded only by my own arrows, begging for my chains. Stunned by every crash and burn to find myself behind the wheel. Couldn't beg or borrow all those feelings I couldn't heal, yeah. But that ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. I've risen above the ruins of the life I left before. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. I've been freed from the shackles that were keeping my heart torn. Found myself lost and alone, trapped by the walls of despair. Tripping over the paradise I denied was even there. Building both a house of cards and the storm to blow it down. More comfortable living in the ashes of a life burned to the ground. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. I've risen above the ruins of the life I lived before. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. I've been freed from the shackles that were keeping my heart torn. I've been to hell and back to hell again. Wounded only to my own arrows, begging for my change. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. I've risen above the ruins of the life I lived before. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. I've been free from the shackles, keeping my heart torn. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. Like a phoenix born to fire, I'm free to find the soul. That ain't me anymore, that ain't me anymore. Holding on to something I can't afford to ignore.
Thank you.
Does all good music come from traumatic life experiences?
Not all, but it certainly helps. Yeah, it's funny. I think about it every now and again. You know, when in my early days of writing, you know, like late teens, early 20s, give or take, when things were so tumultuous and stuff all the time, I sometimes lament that it was easier to write songs back then because there's so much raw emotion. And you know, now, you know, coming into my mid 30s, I'm so at peace most days, and I'm like, I find it harder sometimes to write really emotionally songs with a lot of emotional gravity in order to do that. And so it seems that most of the songs are a lot happier these days.
So you're in your lounge and elevator music phase right now.
No. Not there yet, but certainly I would say more uplifting than depressing than previously.
Yeah. Do any of you others write?
I help out with some of the music aspects of it, but not as much lyrically. But I hope to get into that someday. But at the moment, I stick with the 6 strings, and sometimes more. But for now, I help out with music at least.
Well,
the musical part of that.
James and his voice. I mean, that's the core we're building around here, right? So most comes from him, and we have to write our own parts, right? Yeah, sure. Like Luke is indirectly writing his drum parts, and I'm writing bass parts. But yeah, lyrically, I mean, I don't know. Not about me. I do stuff on the side, but that's me. That's not the band. That's my own stuff, right? So,
So when you're writing, you're not writing for the band. You're writing for you.
Band,
yeah. We kind of all pull our own weight and kind of figure it out, and it works out in the end.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening for me, like looking back, I started writing lyrics really young, like probably 10 or 11 years old, and picked up a guitar so that I'd have an outlet for those lyrics, right? And so I kind of approach songs the opposite way you hear most people doing them, where they'll come up with a guitar part or piano part or something, and then write lyrics to go over top of the melody that they come up with. And usually what ends up happening with me is I have lyrics that have a melody in my head, and then I pick up my guitar and try to match it as best as I can. That being said, I've got binders of thousands of songs worth of lyrics, and only about 50 or 60 of those actually have full songs with them. And the Mark has been a godsend as far as that goes, because some of the stuff that I don't have as far as skill set goes on the guitar, he's able to find the guitar part to match my lyrics, and it's kind of a cool dynamic there. But what ends up happening is I come to the band with kind of just a skeleton of a song, right? I've got a vocal melody and the basic guitar chords for it, and I'm like, here you go, guys. Build on top of the skeleton that I brought, right? And somehow there's a working mechanism that comes out of that.
And I push you some, and then you push back, which I appreciate.
So you've got the poetry that you're setting to music, as opposed to adding words to a song.
Yeah, more often than not.
Yeah. Not everybody works that way, I don't think.
No.
Yeah. And you said something about you're all responsible for your own parts, So who does the arranging?
We will have different inputs from different places. Like we'll say, hey, but what if we did this in this part instead of what we got going on right now? Like, what if we tried this instead? And, right, because the arranging, when I hear arranging, I think in the classical sense, right? Like, well, you need to see something arranged by. So we're always arranging it. We're just not thinking it necessarily as that in that sense, right? We're arranging it more from the aspect of we're challenging and saying, can you write a double chorus there instead of a single? Can you actually put the bridge here? Can you, right? So we're collectively usually coming up with that input, because sometimes it'll be the drummer says, Luke says, hey, I think we need to do shots here, but the shots here don't work unless we do this here. So what if we switch that around, right? And different things like that.
Yeah. So James doesn't write note for note the bass line. You, Adam, put the bass line in on your own as it matches the rest of the music that James has written.
Yeah, we all get together in a room and say, okay, this song kind of goes like this. This is the map that we kind of have, and say, what if we,
sometimes,
what if we tried this and move things around?
We'll run through it and say, well, now maybe we should have a double chorus at the end, or maybe we should have, instead of one great big long solo at the end, have 2 little solos in there, or and then let's run through it once, see how it sounds, and then at the end, well, what do you think? Okay, well, so it's kind of trial and error too.
And does it get committed to paper? Is there actually
sometimes not as well as it should? We do, yeah. Well, there's digital copies of all of this to some extent. somewhere.
In somebody's phone or in somebody's.
But the question is, like, has it been revised since the first time we saw it? Not necessarily. It might be like, well, that was the first draft. If you actually want to know what we're playing now, you'll have to just be us, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that you've been working on a piece for a couple of weeks, and you come to the conclusion that no, it was better 2 weeks ago. How can you get back to that spot?
Digital recording.
Digital recording,
right? So like, any time that, like, Mark and I get together to write, or if we're trying out a song as a band for the first time, right? One of us will have our phones or a GoPro or something going, so that we can hear what it was like in its first incarnation.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yep.
And so we can always go back to it, right? As whenever we're covers, we don't really need to do much with, but with original stuff, so that everyone kind of remembers, we always kind of just look back and say, okay, this is how Luke did, that fill like 3 weeks ago. That was really cool. Let's try that, and so on and so forth, right? That ain't me anymore. We still play it the same way I brought it to the band, but like Want to Not Want You Back that we opened with there. And it was such a simple revision, but that Luke had suggested that we do like a little bit of a intro of the chorus into the song before the rest of the song starts. The way I had it written initially was just jump right into the first verse sort of thing. And I like playing it the way Luke edited it better.
Yeah. And does it develop over time as you're doing live shows? You've got audience reaction that you might be playing to.
Whenever I suggest a revision, if I'm suggesting the revisions, I try and think, what would I want to hear coming from the radio or coming from the stage? What would I want to hear from this song? And I say, hey, let's try this. Maybe this will work. Like I suggested that intro. I was like, that sounds to me like something that I would want to hear come out of my speakers when I'm listening to the radio. That would be more pleasurable to my ear.
You gave the song a progression too. It built up to a bigger ending than it would have if you jumped right into it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Not often do we end up changing it up live too often. Like there was one time, we were at a show and Mark and I were doing a kind of an in-between thing, giving these guys a break for a couple songs and just doing an acoustic thing. We started playing Wild Horses by the Rolling Stones, and we got to a chord progression in there that I'm like, wait a second. And like right in the middle of it, I'm like, okay, we're going to go into Can't Always Get What You Want by the Stones, and then circle back to it, and it worked out nicely. And there's other times, there's a song that I brought to the band called I Can't Quit You, which is more just like a 12-bar blues style song. And depending on how the audience is reacting to it and stuff, sometimes like we'll just let Mark go. And other times, if they're not really responding to it, we'll kind of reel them in and just jump back into the next verse, right? We can kind of gauge that much, but yeah.
The guitar.
Otherwise, the changes are likely limited to us as individual musicians. Like, we might play one thing particularly slightly different, but it won't be something that would change the structure, unless it's me forgetting an entire section of the song. In which case, we will change the song.
Rebel Yell.
Yeah, I have issues with that particular song as well, but I do quite enjoy playing.
For those of you listening, the guitar you're hearing on top is Mark. He's got his own microphone. Then James has the rhythm, the strong chords coming out, and Luke and Adam are sharing a mic at the end because that's the only mics we've got in the studio.
All good.
How about something else? You said you have a blues number. Oh, I'm putting you on the spot here.
We might need a break in order to.
Okay, not to worry. Something else original if you can.
Supernova.
Okay. Yep.
Raised eyebrows in the studio.
Well, yeah, we didn't know how long we were going to have in the studio, so we only rehearsed a couple numbers acoustically. But this next one is just a silly little love song called Supernova. Your eyes illuminate the room they draw. Every
You guys got energy. Pretty good. I'm looking at the instruments. I'm seeing Mark here with a beautiful red glowing guitar with some lovely artwork on the pick guard. Is there a history to the instrument?
This is actually older than I am. This is a guitar that my dad had, and I picked up when I was a kid, and I tried playing. I said, "Come on, show me something. I want to learn this." And I was probably just a wee lad, about 8 or 9, and he said, "I'm sorry, buddy, your hands are just not big enough." And ever since then, I just I want to play it. But anyways, this is a Gibson Hummingbird knockoff. Unfortunately, it's not a real thing. But you put it next to the real thing, it looks identical, and it's been through a lot. If this guitar could talk, it would have a lot of stories. So I've been playing since I was probably 11 or 12. Once my hands were big enough, and then this is what I learned on. So it's this guitar is very dear to me, and I plan on keeping it around for sure.
It's got good sound in it. And you are sitting, Adam, or Luke, you're sitting on a box, and you're playing a box. You're playing the thing you're sitting on.
This is useful for acoustic gigs like this, or if we go into the park or whatever. The technical term is cajon, which is Spanish for box. So you can call it a box, but it's got some wires in there that make it have the kind of snare sound. And because it's a box, it has the thud of the bass drum as well. So it kind of encapsulates the whole drum set without having to carry around a whole drum set. So
I did hear you were getting some different sounds out of it during as you were playing. So
yeah, there's a bunch of different sounds. I paid a ridiculous fortune for this, so I can even move the wires back and forth and make it sound different that way too. So
like an open and closed snare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cajon got started in Cuba when slaves from Africa were kidnapped there, and slaves didn't have instruments, so they would just grab a box and start hitting it with their hands.
Right.
And someone in about the 1950s, someone decided, hey, what if we actually made that into an instrument and we could make millions of dollars? And like I said, I paid a ridiculous fortune for it, so someone out there is making a good amount of money on this.
When did the snares get added? I mean, boxes don't come with snares.
I'm probably somewhere in the 50s. The people who made them probably said, "Hey, what if we put the snare wires in the box?" And
there's a rumor that if they were playing on old enough boxes, that it would rattle enough that they could get it to sound kind of that way. There's rumors, unfounded.
Now, Adam, you have an acoustic bass.
I do have,
and it's a 5-string bass. Yes. I thought strings always came in even numbers.
Not always. No, it's the bass is actually interesting because it's I typically do play on a 4-string. The actual whole reason for this is because of acoustic shows like this. It's actually not even my bass guitar. It's actually my brother's bass guitar. So I borrow it from him whenever I need to play an acoustic show, just because, I mean, as most people know, the average bass that is played in a band is electric only.
Electric bass,
you are not going to hear a lick of anything out of it if I bring it in. Well, you'll hear some off the strings, but not near enough.
And the only other acoustic basses I've seen are the big uprights.
Yeah, the big uprights, right? But that is much more unaffordable to bring to an acoustic bass than borrowing your brother's bass, right? Going to your brother and say, hey, give me your bass is a lot more affordable than going for $1,000 to get an upright bass and having to figure out how because they're not fretted, right? Those are the differences as well. I mean, guitars are fretted instruments, right? So you know where you're supposed to be versus violins, basses, upright basses. You have to learn by sound, right? Which, I mean, clearly people can do because there's whole orchestras. But for those of us who are less inclined toward learning the instrument, this is a lot easier route to go.
So is it longer than a regular guitar? It looks like the next.
It is longer. Basses are typically longer than an original guitar or than a standard guitar. And then the scale of the neck will be important as well. So, I mean, my guitar bass I normally play is a slightly shorter bass than average. The bass you hear everyone talk about is the Fender, I think it's P bass. And it's a quite long bass guitar. I actually play a shorter scale one, particularly just because I started on guitar. And so to transition into playing bass, it was a lot easier for me to play a shorter scale bass. But yeah, it's definitely longer. It's a different way to fundamentally different way to play, right? So.
And for a bass instrument, it doesn't have a very large resonating body. The body of the
No, it
guitar
doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, I think it's just because the weight, I think, would start to get to you. I'm not 100% sure. It's definitely a thin body. It's not super thick. You can tell the difference. I mean, it won't resound as much as you would if it was a bigger one. I mean, I could also, if I wanted to play louder, I could use a pick and stuff like that. But it's just, it's not me. It's not me. I don't use a pick.
Has electric pickup in there too?
It does. It does. Yep. For if those instances where you would need that. But to be honest, if I ever had an opportunity to plug into a sound system, I'm going with my electric bass all the time anyway. So.
Okay.
Might as well.
And to round up the instrument inventory, James, you have a guitar.
I do. I think so, right?
It is covered in memorabilia.
Yeah. Weird little story. I just found a lot on a website called Wish that had a lot of 150 different band stickers for $5, and I was like, can't go wrong. And so couldn't decide on which bands I liked the most, and so I just slapped every single one on there.
Put them all on, yeah. Does that affect the quality of the sound? Does it dampen the soundboard at all?
He hasn't got that there, but
I got no idea. I don't feel like it's changed anything.
Okay.
Sounds about right still. Didn't change anything from before I had the stickers. But.
Okay. Well, that's good. I've heard of people who put a single sticker on their guitar and say, "Oh, it never sounded worse than it does now." So, a friend of mine had a guitar pasted Zot on the front there.
It's part of the mental game too, right? I mean, because when he first showed up with that guitar, I was like, "Oh my goodness, he put stickers all over his guitar." But that's just from the aspect of I would never, I'd be like, not a chance. I'm ever putting anything on my instrument. I'm like, I can respect that though. The man knows he likes the instrument. He knows he's going to keep it. It's not going anywhere. So there's no need to keep it. I'm the guy who built Lego and put it on the shelf and then just never actually played it.
It's more of a model.
Yeah, I had a Slinky, but I streaked it.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. Want to play something else? And then we'll get into what you're up to, upcoming gigs, where we can find you online. But let's hear a little bit more music first.
Sure.
Sure.
All right. This one's a cover. Stephanie, my beautiful fiance, does not like U2, so I apologize, my dear, because we're about to bust into some U2.
Stone set in your eyes, see the thorn twist in your side, and away slide a band-aid of fate, never nail, she makes me wait, and away.
or without you. I can't live with or without you. With or without you.
CKMS FM 102.7. We have in the studio the boys and I with James Blacktop, Mark, Luke, and Adam. What's in the future for you guys? What are you doing next?
Well, what aren't we doing next? Guess I'll have to field that one because, as Adam previously pointed out, I'm the one doing all the bookings. I just kind of get us all booked up and then say, hey guys, here's where we're playing. Hopefully everyone's available.
So how does that happen? How do you get the gigs? Do you go to Kijiji and look, musicians wanted?
Actually, I'll have to give a shout out to my boss and the people I work with. Number one, they're letting me be here instead of at work right now. Yeah, all of us really, I think in an alternate universe, we could have named our band Men with Day Jobs. But yeah, they're letting me be here today. And for the most part, my job has been very flexible in that. And so a lot of the time I spend is cold calling bars and festivals and stuff like that. And, I got some good advice from a friend of mine in a band called Breaching Vista. And he's like, it's like anything else in sales. It's a 1 in 10 ratio, right? And so if I put myself out there to 10 different places a day, who knows, we'll probably book a gig, right? And it's been getting pretty busy lately.
That's good.
So upcoming, we are playing, let's see here. Let's try to keep it all in memory.
Pick and Shovels first, right?
Yeah. The Pick and Shovel in downtown Cambridge, 30 Water Street South. We'll be playing there the Saturday of the Labor Day long weekend, August 31st from 10 p.m. till 1 a.m. And then we are doing a benefit show for Kitchener's One Roof. It's at Harmony Lunch. It's running all day. I don't have exactly the times. I believe it's like 2 p.m. till about 1 a.m. in our set. We'll be playing from, I think, 7 to 7:20 p.m. somewhere in the middle of the day.
You've got Trevor from One Roof coming in next week.
Oh,
and, possibly Colin from Binoculars, a Montreal band, who's playing with you as well.
Yes.
Excellent.
And then Mark and I are doing a couple acoustic things. One out in a place called Bell City Brewing out in Brantford for a couple hours, and Striker's Kitchen and Bar in Kitchener for a couple hours. And then we are doing a show also at Harmony Lunch with a bunch of other bands on September 27th. And then our first real out-of-town gig together, October 5th at the Atria in Oshawa with a few other bands, and so on and so forth.
Excellent.
And yeah.
So I'll have that list posted on the radiowaterloo.ca/CCC website. CCC for CKMS Community Connections. See all the previous shows on there and show notes for today.
Beautiful.
Yep, get you a little bit of promotion there. Promotion does work, obviously, because I saw you at the Nonviolence Day in the Park. And
the only way to succeed is to actually get out there, right? Like, that's the thing. Yeah. There's a certain amount of that goes along with, like, yeah, you're going to start as nothing. Don't expect to start as anything huge.
It's just like you were saying with that impression of a live performance. If you make a good impression, it's great. If you make that bad impression, well, but an impression that can be made in a live performance, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This isn't the first band you've formed, is it, James?
Honestly, it is.
Is it?
If I'm gonna full disclosure, so something that for myself that comes along with the struggles that I had with drinking and drugging was that I was prone to be a bit of a control freak, and so I taught myself how to play bass and drums and piano, and I was productive out of being a bit of a control freak, but at the same time, I can't relate that live, right? And it was only after getting sober that I had enough humility to actually give up the reins a little bit enough to actually be able to work well with others.
And so you've got some stuff in the digital library that you gave to us. That's solo work then.
Yeah, that was stuff that I recorded at a little studio here in Kitchener, late teens, early 20s, few tracks there. And again, other than the producer playing drums on it, because I was not strong enough for drums on those tracks. The rest is just everything that I've written, and I play all the parts on it. But, that being said, they're nothing like what the boys and I are doing anyway.
Yeah, so we'll hear some of those tunes on the KW Con content show on Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember now. Program director DJ JD is in the studio. Any idea when our Canadian content music is?
Yeah, I think it's on Sunday.
Sundays. Okay, Sunday KW Con in the afternoon sometime. So you'll be on that rotation.
Beautiful.
Excellent. You have streaming music.
Mhm.
How do we hear that?
That would be if you look up James Blacktop on Spotify, Apple Music, anything else like that. That would be the place to go.
We'll have the links there for you too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as far as the boys and I go, it'd be simple: www.facebook.com/the boys and I band, or Reverb Nation, pretty much the same thing, reverbnation.com/the boys and I band.
Admittedly, you can't just Google us. I've tried.
No.
Yeah, I had a bit of trouble myself this morning.
Yeah. Google search optimization. They really want you to pay into someone in order to get it up there.
Yeah.
We got a good number of hits on our site. Maybe that'll improve your Google juice a bit.
Amen. And on the Facebook page and everything, there's links to we've got videos of live performances and us in the rehearsal hall and stuff. Yeah, doing stuff, and of course links to our shows, and it's got the link to our YouTube channel that's got all those videos and a few extras as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Want to play me out? Got about 2 minutes left. I have to do the credits and whatnot. So if you want to provide me some musical accompaniment for that, that'd be absolutely wonderful.
12 Bernie. Sure.
Oh, we got the blues too.
And before we wrap her up, I need to give a shout out to my daughter McKenna. It is her 9th birthday today. Love you, dear. Hope you're listening.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday.
All right.
You've been listening to CKMS Community Connections. We've had live in the studio James Blacktop from The Boys and I with Mark, Luke, and Adam. It's been a wonderful day. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. CKMS Community Connections airs every Monday at 10 o'clock. Executive producer is Jennifer Strong, Yenny Strong. Co-producer is JD Jordan in the studio today as well. CKMS Community Connections is sponsored by Radio Waterloo, CKMS FM 102.7 on your FM dial. Coming up next, Lost in the City with music and movies.